Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Veterinary Life Coach podcast. If it's your first time listening to the podcast, welcome, welcome. This is the podcast where we talk about loving veterinary medicine, working on self-development, and better mental health. Today, I have a very exciting and wonderful guest for you. Her name is Dr. Amy Grimm, and she's a veterinarian and a certified life coach, which you know I love. She is nervous system informed, and she is the founder of daringdvm.com. Welcome to the podcast, Amy. I'm thrilled to have you.
Yes, thank you so much, Julie. I'm excited to be here too.
Yeah, I'm so glad we met up because anybody that's a veterinarian and a life coach is kind of a kindred spirit to me because I think it's such an interesting combination, and I think it's so important to our profession. So I'm really excited to talk about all of this stuff with you.
Yes, yeah.
So the first question I always ask everyone is to tell me their veterinary story. So can you tell me yours?
Yes, absolutely. I started out wanting to be a vet since I was a child. And a lot of times I tell people I'm not even sure if I ever actually knew I wanted to be a vet or if it was just something that was offered to me. You know, like when your parents say, "Oh, you really like animals, you should be a vet one day."
Yeah, and then
So
it sticks, right?
yes, yeah. So that was my MO from a very young age. And I don't remember ever consciously making a decision myself to do it, although I definitely bought into it and it is something that I wanted to do and pursued over the
Yeah.
years. And yeah, I did all the things that everybody else does, you know, getting all those volunteer hours, working hard, getting into vet school. And at the time I entered vet school, I was doing more research, population health, wildlife, infectious disease. And as I went through the program, I started to get a little bit dismayed about the options that were out there,
Mm.
specifically the options where you could earn enough to have a decent life. And I ended up going into small animal medicine at the time of graduation. So,
For that reason, because you were worried that you couldn't make money. What would you have done
yeah,
instead had you had the option?
I would have probably gone more into like biomedical research. I did a lot of research on the effects of secondhand smoke on the developing immune system throughout
Interesting.
undergrad at vet school. I also worked at a biomedical company for a while where we did a lot of genetic testing and developing pharmaceuticals, which I've always loved the research side of things.
Okay. That's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. And I really liked wildlife and population health and looking at the jobs for, you know, government positions was a little bit sad at the time. I think, you know, you're graduating vet school, and I'm sure people have this experience where you have student loans and the opening position they're offering you is, you know, 30 to 50 grand a year. And you're like, well, this is a reality check.
Yeah, there's
Um,
no way, right? You're going to pay back all your student loans with that kind of salary.
yeah, yeah. So I went into small animal medicine with the plan of doing that for a few years and then eventually getting back into more of that research side of things. And then my career took a completely different turn. So I never imagined I would be here today as a life coach, and it's not something that was ever on my radar before.
I didn't even
But
know there was such a thing
yeah, me
when I
neither.
learned about it. I had wished I had ran across it when I was much younger.
Hmm.
I think it's such useful stuff just personally to have for yourself.
Yes. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
remember my first exposure to it was, do you remember Dr. Kimberly Pope Robinson? And
Oh
she
yeah. Yeah,
did,
she was
yeah,
on the podcast with me.
yeah,
Yeah,
she
I've
did the
met her
whole
several
filling
times.
balloons. Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. So I saw her speak at a medical director event that I went to. And I was like, how do I do this? Like, this looks like something that's really cool and fun.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I kind of shrugged it off and was like, oh, it's not possible for me. I'm just going to keep doing what I do. And it found me several years later.
It came back around, huh? How did that happen?
Yeah.
Were you getting sick of being a small animal vet, or like how did it find you again?
Yeah, great question. So, I've been practicing for about 10 years now, and the first 5 were as an associate, and I tried multiple different hospitals. The whole change of circumstance to see what feels better. So,
Yes, it doesn't always work, does it?
yeah, so, I tried multiple different jobs, large clinics, small clinics, private clinics, corporations. And eventually I ended up at a hospital where we were bought by a corporation. And because I was the main doctor there, I was offered the position of medical director. And I was tired of kind of chasing my tail and trying to figure out what it is that I wasn't connecting with as a small animal vet, because I do love the medicine and the practice and working with the animals and the clients and all of that, but something wasn't right. And I got this opportunity and I was like, well, sure, I'm not going to pass this up. I'm going to
I'll
see
try that.
what happens.
It'd be fun to be the boss, right?
Yeah, yeah. And because it was through corporate, it wasn't on my own dime. It was like,
That's different, right? That makes a
yeah,
difference.
yeah. It's like, I don't have any financial investment in this hospital as a clinic owner would. And I get to, yeah, create a vision and help the team and do all of the stuff that I never thought I would actually enjoy doing.
Right.
And that's really where things started to change for me. I um I really liked being in a position where I could help people in a way that wasn't just helping clients with their animals. It was, teaching technicians, how to do a cytology and to read it and, doing cystos, and also the behind the scenes stuff like the scheduling and making sure that my staff could take time off when they needed it. I often got some pushback because there would be some days where everybody would almost have the day off, but I didn't ever want to be the person who denies somebody the time that they need, especially if it's a health issue, physical or mental health or a family emergency. And I'd sometimes get questioned like, oh, I see that, so and so is not working today and they're not working today. And what are you doing over there? And I'd be like, well, I think mental health is really important. And
More
yeah,
important than the bottom line, right?
exactly. Yeah. So I started to feel a little bit of a disconnect in that position. And I was kind of working through what to do with that when I ended up meeting my now fiance. And at the time, we met right, I think it was like 2 days before COVID, and we decided we're going all in. So we ended up moving in together. And because of that move, I ended up having to give up the medical director job because I'm in a different city now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's daring to
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
drop your job and move to a different city with a guy you've only known a few days.
Yeah. Well, by that time, it was at least a couple months, but this
Yeah.
had been in the works.
Yeah.
And yeah, we actually got a storage unit and split all of our stuff up so that if shit hit the fan, we would at least have the things that we need to put our own lives back
You
together.
could move back out again safely.
Yeah,
I love
exactly.
that.
Yeah. And then I went back to working as an associate, and I didn't even make it a year. I was like, I cannot step back into an associate position after having, the freedom to run my own hospital.
Mhm.
And that was a very difficult decision for me because I really loved the team. They practiced great medicine. The owner of the hospital was wonderful. She always looked out for her staff and all of these things that I really admired, and had to then reconcile that with the fact that this isn't what I want to do with my life. And now what?
Right. That's the
Um,
hardest thing, right? I think
yeah.
I talk to so many veterinarians that are like, I really don't feel like this is aligning with me, but I don't know what to
Hmm.
do, you know?
Yes. Yeah. And I still hadn't discovered the tools of life coaching yet. So during this time, I was burning myself out, just always stressed, overwhelmed, didn't feel in control, couldn't understand why I felt so bad, even though the work I'm doing is good. Um, and I almost developed this resentment towards the practice, like not to any people in particular, but it was just feeling like I was stuck and couldn't see a way out. And is this what my life is going to look like forever and ever and ever? And eventually I just handed in my resignation with no plan. I was
Really?
like, yeah,
That's
don't know what I'm
awesome.
doing.
Yeah. Don't know
But
where I'm
it's,
going next.
yeah, but it's not this, and I'm going to figure it out.
Right.
And it was during that time of just self-reflection and kind of looking what was out there, I ended up interviewing for a regional medical director position at another company that was expanding. And it would have been, more at the regional level where you travel between hospitals and help their staff, set up their hospitals and sort of manage in a more offhands kind of way as far as medicine goes. And I made it, I think I was one of three applicants to get to that final interview. And then I didn't get the job.
Oh, that's heartbreaking, right? Were you
Yeah,
excited about getting the job? Like, was it a big disappointment?
it was. Yeah, because it entailed, the kind of things that I'd loved as a medical director at a small hospital, but on a larger scale. And for me, the impact that that would have made would have been really cool.
Right.
And it it took me away from the actual practice of medicine, but I was still involved enough where I could have a level of influence with the vision and supporting the doctors and the staff and that kind of stuff. And one of the people I had interviewed with, she was a regional director in another state. And I'd asked her a lot about her job and what she does, trying to figure out if this is a good fit for me. And there were just some things that she said about how she was able to do the things that I was looking to do, and really help the people and to not be burned out and always feeling like you're overscheduled and never have a personal life. And that's really what got me looking into coaching, that conversation with her and not getting the job because I was like, well, I guess I have to come up with plan C
Now,
now.
what else? What else am I going to do? Well, and on some
Yeah.
level, that does sound a bit like coaching.
Hmm.
As you were going to be helping, that was one of the reasons that coaching appealed to me is because I spent a lot of my career as a hospital owner coaching my own team members,
Hmm.
and kind of counseling them and the leadership part of it. And, that's how when I discovered life coaching, I was like, oh, this encompasses all the things I love to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I discovered it through one of our veterinary Facebook groups where somebody had made a post, which was, what podcast do you guys listen to? And in that thread, somebody had put Cara Loventhal's podcast, the Unfuck Your Brain. I
Okay. Yep.
listened to that and I was like, this is magical. Everybody needs to know this stuff.
Exactly.
So through her, I followed that back to Brooke and the life coach school. And I saw that they were going to open up training for the next round of life coaches in August of that year. And I think it was around like maybe April or so. So I just signed up for self-coaching scholars so I could get a head start on the material. And then when the certification opened up, I jumped into that. And yeah, I've never looked back.
Now, are you still working as a veterinarian at all? Are you doing relief work, or is it just you just like mic dropped and you're all in with the life coaching?
Yeah, good question. I still practice vet med, and I do so as a relief vet and specifically surgery. So most of it is the high volume, high quality spay neuter, but
Okay.
I will still get a chance to do, like soft tissue surgeries and all of that fun stuff, which is really something that I love about vet med. So I have created this, job or career for myself where I still get to hold both. And yeah,
Right.
that was just something that I don't even think I realized was a possibility until I started this journey. It was more of that either or kind of thing. And now it's like, wow, I can practice medicine in the way that I like to practice medicine and doing the things that I love and still get to do this other stuff like the
Right. And I
coaching.
think that's what so
Yeah.
many people don't think about. It's like, what do you like about vet med? And so then what can you do? And can you limit it to just doing the things you like to do? I mean, there's so many possibilities. And that's one of the things I love about veterinary medicine is the variety. Like you
Hmm.
can basically design, you can work a half a day a week, or you can work 7 days a week. You can work midnights, or you can work early mornings. Like it's so varied. You can own, you can not own. Like, there's just so many options. And I think until I, really started hearing all the distress in the profession, I was just like, I don't understand why people don't get that it's like, it's in your power. And I think
Hmm.
when I ran across the life coaching, just like you, I was like, oh, this is stuff that everybody needs to know. And it will transform you and in a magical kind of way. I
Hmm.
love that word magical because it is. Life coaching it's so interesting and fascinating and like magic in a lot of
Hmm.
ways.
Yeah, and that's so interesting to hear your experience, like how you weren't experiencing as much of the burnout and the suffering because, of what you were doing. And yeah, back then at that time, I couldn't even imagine that being a possibility. I was like,
Yeah, I
this
don't
is
know,
just how it is.
something about the way I saw other veterinarians as because I was the same as you. I wanted to be a vet my whole life. And so I was volunteering and I was getting, jobs with veterinarians and seeing the way they practiced. And maybe it's a generational thing, but to me, it was like if I could own my own practice, then I would have control over all those things. I could work when I wanted to work. I could not work when I didn't want to work. I could counsel my team and give them a lovely life,
Hmm.
and I don't know why I had that attitude, but that's why I did what I did. And that's why I loved it so much, is because I kind of designed my own career. And it doesn't mean that I didn't work hard, and it doesn't mean that I wasn't there on Sundays, and it doesn't mean that I didn't have to leave my kids at times. I did all of that, but I did it willingly and with the idea that this was what I had chosen and that I really wanted to do. And, you have bad days, and I can't tell you that there weren't times when I didn't feel burned out. I absolutely did.
Hmm.
But then for some reason, I was able to kind of change my mind about it enough that I knew that I loved it more than I didn't love it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I want other people to love it. And that's why I do what I do
Hmm.
now. So tell
Yeah.
me, tell me about the life coaching piece. Like, what do you love about it? What's magic about it to you?
Man, so many things.
I know, right? These life coaches, it's like we're on drugs or something. We love it so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, I remember there was some cartoon or something when we were kids, and I just remember one of the characters saying, like, I don't do drugs, I'm high on life. And I thought it was really funny. And now I'm like, oh, I think I'm one of those people.
You're one of those crazy people that's just happy all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, not happy all the time. I still have my negative emotions, but can deal with them so much better and don't feel stuck in them or trapped in them, able to process them, understand them, offer myself compassion. And it's really expanded almost my, I would say, feelings, like the kinds of emotions I have. I think everything before was very narrow and focused. And now it's like, oh, it's okay to experience this whole range and everything will still be okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the key. We all think that negative emotion is something that we don't want to have. And so we fight so hard against it rather than just
Mm-hmm.
accepting that everyone has it. You know, people say, "Well, I have anxiety." And I say, "Well, we all have anxiety, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to different levels." I experienced more anxiety as I've gotten older than I did have when I was younger, at least that I've noticed. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's because I'm a life coach and I can put names on things better than I used to be able to, or and I don't avoid it like I used to. But just the fact that we all have these negative emotions about everything. It's
Yeah.
not just vet med. It's
Mm-hmm.
about, you know, life. And life is good and bad and, you know, sometimes happy and sometimes sad. And
Mm-hmm.
that's, you know, that's the thing about life coaching that's exciting is being able to experience all that and
Yes.
knowing that it's all okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, just not having that, should mentality. It should be this way or it shouldn't be that way. It's, yeah, really just opened up my way of thinking about things and then also being able to handle things. And, back to your original question about what do you love about life coaching the most, it's really everything. Like, your relationships improve, your relationship to yourself and with others, just your day to day improves, like your life feels better. You're still going through the challenges and adversities of life, but it's almost like once you've learned the tools, you can't unsee it or go back to the way it was before.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to get buried again or get stuck again because you know it's all
Hmm.
within your power
Hmm.
to change.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's really what I love about it is empowering. And I'm somebody who is all for empowering individuals and, helping them live life on their terms. So I think that's really why I just fell in love with it.
Yeah. Tell me about the neuroscience part of it. In your introduction, I read that you're a nervous system informed. Tell me what that means and maybe explain that to the people that are listening. I think I have an idea, but
Okay.
tell me what that means.
Yeah. So this was another thing that I stumbled upon. It seems to be how
If
I
you're interested, you
get
will
things.
learn things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I went to a mastermind last year and I saw Leah Davidson speak, and she was talking about being nervous system informed and how that can really help you in your coaching of clients. And it has to do with creating safety in the body, because when we're using a tool like the self-coaching model, we are relying on the person's cognitive ability to be present and to use their executive function skills and to be able to determine, this thought is serving me or it isn't. And you've probably had this experience too with some of your clients. Like sometimes they just cannot think of another thought, or they just doesn't seem like there's another way. And it's almost like they're drawing a blank and don't know how to move forward. And a
Right?
lot of that has to do with their nervous system because they have been impacted by all of these prior experiences and past learnings and traumas, whether that be adverse childhood events or big T or little t traumas. And they all leave imprints on our nervous system. And our nervous system is very closely tied to that survival part of our brain, that motivational triad, so to
Yeah,
speak.
I call that little part of our brain the Chihuahua brain because it's so overreactive, you know, like
Yes.
Chihuahuas sometimes are.
Yes. Yeah. I commonly use monkey brain because I
Yep,
think it's cute. So, yeah.
similar. Yeah, similar.
Yeah. And what's happening with these people who just cannot change their thinking or see another way is oftentimes they're in a dysregulated nervous state. We're supposed to spend about 80% or so of our time in our parasympathetic state, that rest and digest. And it's in the state where we have access to that cognitive portion of our brain where we can think about who we are and who we want to be, and we can make decisions and plan and think about our thinking and all the stuff that we do in coaching. And when you are in more of a dysregulated state and you're operating more from that survival mentality, you lose connection with your prefrontal cortex. So, if you've ever experienced being triggered, somebody says something and you don't know why, but you just have this immediate reaction, and it's sort of that fight, flight, or freeze reaction.
Right.
And nothing dangerous has happened in the moment. They haven't really said anything harmful, but you're just on alert. And that's because your autonomic nervous system has been triggered and you're going into a state of sympathetic dominance, which is triggering your survival brain. And that is going to color the way you see things and think about things. And we're meant to have these reactions. They're completely normal. We're supposed to go in and out of sympathetic and parasympathetic states all day long. But the problem becomes when you get stuck in one of these dysregulated states, and then you lose access. And this is why sometimes you can't think of the words to say, or you try to say something and you're thinking it in your mind, but the words come out completely different, or you're frozen, or you feel irrationally angry. All of these things are because you haven't reached that rest and digest, and you've lost access to, we call it your CEO, because it's the
Yes.
executive portion of your brain.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really where that nervous system part comes in, is helping people create tools to bring them back into that parasympathetic state so that you can then have more of the cognitive coaching conversation with them and help them work through their problems. And a lot of times that's kind of a trigger that can help them start thinking in new ways and different things and creating the results that ultimately they want.
Right. So when you're in that state of feeling overwhelmed or feeling anxious or feeling some of these negative emotions that feel so overpowering, that's just your normal brain kicking in. And
Mm-hmm.
there are ways to get it to kick back out again. So you can get back into that
Yes.
mode of the parasympathetics.
Yeah. Yeah. So this work it's so important because, one, everybody has a nervous system, right? Biologically.
And if you
That's
don't,
a
there's a
fact.
problem, right?
Yeah. Are you a zombie? We
Right,
don't
right,
know. Yeah. And learning to understand it, because if you think of your nervous system, it's kind of like this giant scanning radar. And I'm talking specifically about your autonomic nervous system. And it's looking at everything in your environment all the time and trying to determine whether this is safety or danger. And that's its job. It wants us to survive.
right.
And this radar, it scans everything external to us, so everything going on in the environment. It also scans everything internal to us, so heart rate, breathing, even seeing what little neurochemical cocktails are being released. And then it also scans other nervous systems. So between you and I, and, it's looking at, is this person safe? Sometimes you can see somebody and you just get like a really great vibe about them and you are like, I want to be this person's friend. Or you can see somebody and be like, oh, I get a bad vibe from this person.
Yeah, stay
Uh,
away.
Yeah, and that's your nervous system scanning all of these things at once. And there's two main problems with your scanning radar. And one is that it's not very accurate. So it always errs towards the side of danger because it's much better for you to assume something is dangerous and survive than to assume it is safe and then you ultimately die, right?
Right,
Back in the
right.
caveman
Yeah,
days.
it overprotects, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the second problem is it doesn't have an awareness of time. And that's why you can feel triggered because there's something that it's remembering from a previous learning or experience that you've had that it thinks is present in your current moment and it triggers that. And that's why you get sent into one of those protective states.
Mm-hmm.
So it's scanning and scanning and it's doing its job. It's just not very accurate and it doesn't always know where it is. And it's kind of like a smoke alarm. It's supposed to sound the alarm so that you can get out of the burning building and survive.
Right.
But a lot of times you're just cooking something on the stove or you burn some toast and the smoke alarm sounds. So there's no real danger there.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it has to do with then being able to catch yourself. So awareness, what's happening? Am I safe? Do I feel safe? And then being able to get into your body and actually acutely relax it so that you can bring that more cognitive portion of yourself back online and then be able to say, okay, what do I want to do in this situation? A lot of times, it's like a difficult conversation or something that's going on and it's not a real threat, but physiologically it feels like one.
It's scary, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's being able to create that sort of pause, that space, that moment for you to go, oh, okay, I'm not in any real danger here. Let me take a step back and see what I want to do next.
Right. Yeah. And I think when people that are talking about mental health and talking about coaching and all the things and even therapy, it seems very like, well, just take a deep breath and just, meditate and just do
Mm-hmm.
yoga. And I think sometimes that makes people angry because they're like, it's not that simple. And
Mm-hmm.
and in a way it is, because what
Mm-hmm.
you're doing when you're taking these deep breaths is you're re-engaging, that vagus nerve, and
Yes.
you're bringing yourself back to a calmer state. But it also, unless you understand what's actually happening and why your body
Mm-hmm.
is reacting the way it is, it doesn't sound like possible. Um, it doesn't sound available,
Yes.
because I've had anxiety and even panic attacks. And when you're in the midst of it, you just feel like you can't do anything about it. And
Mm-hmm.
then your brain spins up and you're so caught in it that you're just terrified. And
Mm-hmm.
it really is just that smoke alarm going off. It's just that overreaction,
Yeah.
to your past, to your old thoughts. I like to think of the Chihuahua brain, not only as trying to keep you safe, but also it's like a storage compartment for all the bad things that ever happened to you. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's so scared, because it's like, well, do you remember when you were 5 and somebody yelled at you and you got in trouble? And you don't really remember that, but your brain
Mm-hmm.
does. And so
Yes.
anytime voices get loud, especially if you were raised in a household that felt dangerous, the
Mm-hmm.
voices get loud and then you go into that kind of panic mode.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And
once
every
you realize
time,
that's all it is, you're like, oh, it's just my brain. It really isn't real.
yes. No,
It
that's
feels
so
so real.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I was going to say there is like every time you go into that cycle, you reinforce that neural pathway. So that's the importance of awareness and creating that space and that pause, and then trying to forge a new neural pathway. And this is why it feels so difficult sometimes because it's really tiny and weak compared to the big highway that already exists.
Yeah, and you're basically, by coaching yourself or going through therapy and doing the work that's involved, is you're retraining
Mm-hmm.
that part of your brain. You're like, okay,
Yes.
brain, I am going to take what you have now and I'm going to show you how it can be different. But it
Mm-hmm.
is a process. And I think that's why people get so frustrated with it. It's like, oh, I'm just supposed to do yoga and everything's supposed to be okay. It's like, no, that's not the way it works. But that's what it seems like when people offer it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, just the science behind it, I think, is really what helped me buy into it because I was one of those people who was like, oh, just take a breath.
Yeah, just do
Er,
circular breathing. Hold it for
exactly.
4, blow it out for 4. Like sometimes when people say that, I'm like, oh, really? But
Yep.
but those techniques exist for a reason. And once you
Hmm.
learn what they actually do for you, to try to kind of bring you down a notch so you can then
Hmm.
think straight.
Yes. Yeah. Because there's no way for you to actually just adjust your nervous system So when you're practicing things like breathing, I mean, your vagus nerve is tapping into your sinoatrial node, and your sinoatrial node is the pacemaker of your heart. And if you are consciously slowing the breathing and slowing the heart rate, then you're getting this indirect effect. And that's really what helps you get back in control. And that's also why it's so important to practice breathing, because when you do things like the breath of fire and you're breathing really quickly and practicing increasing your heart rate, and then you do more slow breathing where you focus on the exhale and you're elongating the time between your beats, you're actually increasing your heart rate variability score. And all of the research shows that people who have a higher heart rate variability score, so the time between their beats can be more flexible and change, they live longer, healthier lives, and they have decreased morbidity and mortality, as well as, decreased mental health problems, and they have better emotional health. So you're really setting yourself up for the future as well when you practice these things now.
Right. And practice them when you're, it's available to you. Because
Hmm.
sometimes when you're in that panic mode, it's not as available
Hmm.
without help, right?
Yes. Yeah, and
Practice
that's so
retraining your
important.
brain. Yeah.
Yeah, just practicing these things daily. We like to talk about, being part of a team. So you have your practices that you go to, and these are the actual things that you're practicing in your daily life. And that is so you can be ready for game day. So when that anxiety hits you, you have practiced the tools so much that they become available to you and almost as automatic as, brushing your teeth or tying your shoelaces. And this is where the work is, because it sounds really nice and everybody would love this. But to get to that point, you have to go through a lot of failure first.
Right.
And you're not always going to be aware in the moment. And it's going to start with looking back and working through it from a what could I have done in a kind, compassionate way.
Right.
And
So you're not
yeah,
beating yourself up for the way you did
exactly.
react in the moment. Yeah, I say
Hmm.
that all the time to people that I'm coaching on conflict, because we seem to have a lot of it in vet med, obviously, and seems to be worse since COVID. The clients are a little more demanding and
Hmm.
more conflict friendly, I guess is the right word.
Yeah,
But
because
that
they're
it's
dysregulated.
yeah, they are having the problem with their Chihuahua brain, right? But I think that the same thing applies to that. It's like when I'm teaching people how to deal with conflict, you first have to get yourself to the point where you don't fear it, because we do fear it. It's that, we're
Hmm.
afraid something bad's going to happen or we're going to say something wrong. And it takes practice.
Yes.
I say I love conflict now, but I've spent years perfecting that skill. When a client's getting angry, I want to be angry. I want to go to that. I want to fight. That's my first instinct, is to fight. But
Hmm.
I have to say, okay, that's not the way to fix it. I have to bring myself back into alignment so then I can go into the conflict. And I think that people see people that are good at these skills and they think that it's something that we just are good at. Like
Yeah,
I
like
was
you're just
born
born
to
with
argue
it.
with clients, right? Like I was born to do this and I'm really good at it. But it's not true. It's like it's taken years of practice and making mistakes
Hmm.
and coming back and saying, "Ooh, I should have said this instead of that." And so next time I'm going to try this instead. And I got a little too jazzed up. And so I was, feeling forceful. So they felt forceful back. And I have to practice being calm. And it kind of all applies.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that skill, is that work you have to put in.
Yeah, and just giving yourself the grace and patience and love and kindness that you need, because it's so easy to beat yourself up and say, "Oh, I did it wrong and I should have done it differently."
Because we're perfectionists, right?
Yep.
Like this is I would think the number one problem with veterinarians is somewhere along the line, and maybe it was just we were born kind of with that perfectionist tendencies, and that's why we went into vet med. I don't know, but there's something about us that makes us want to be perfect all the time and or think that we have to be, and it's so untrue.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I struggled with that myself, and
I think
Yeah,
we
even
all do.
today I still do, I'm just
Well,
nicer to myself now.
well, sure. Yeah. Nobody wants to make mistakes and nobody wants to fail. But when you realize that that's the path to get what you want to get where you want to be, like you have to fail at conflict in order to get good at it. You have
Hmm.
to fail at, anxiety and having, anxiety in order to get better at it. There is no other way. And I
Hmm.
think, if I can teach people to give themselves grace and understand that that's part of the process of getting better at whatever it is, then, and everyone still struggles with it, right?
Hmm.
That's a human
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, it's not like you become a coach and suddenly have it all figured out.
No, and sometimes
Like,
people
nope.
ask me that, right? They come to you and they say, how does it feel to have it all figured out? It's like, oh, honey, you should
Yeah.
have saw me yesterday,
Yeah.
when something went wrong and I overreacted or whatever, right?
Hmm.
So tell me what your advice would be as somebody that, has been through vet med, has felt burnout, has, learned about life coaching and nervous system regulation. What would be your advice to somebody that's listening right now that's very much in the struggle and the feeling discouraged about their career or their life in general?
Yeah, great question. I think, I would really lean into the thought that it is possible that things can be different. And more importantly, it is possible for me because I think a lot of us see other people and think that it's available to them, but not always to us.
Right,
And then really getting curious about what your values are and how those values are currently showing up in your life or not. Sometimes when you're feeling burned out, it's just a misalignment, and that's something that's easy to fix once you know what the problem is. I mean, it still requires work. It's not an overnight change,
right,
but really looking at what it is that you value, because that's what I had to do, looking at I love, the science and the medicine and the research. And I get to do that now in my role as a coach because I'm always learning more about the nervous system and that kind of research. So it's a little bit different than what I was doing before vet school.
right,
And then my values had to do a lot with having autonomy and freedom and flexibility in my daily life. And having a relief practice has helped me with that.
right,
Um, and I don't think I could have created that in my associate position. I might have had a little bit more power as a medical director, but it still wasn't to the degree that I wanted it to be.
right,
And then I love helping and being in service. And that's also a little bit different now because I'm not practicing, um, you know, one on one, like with clients. I'm doing mostly surgery where I don't see the people, I just see the animals. But to me, that's still a, a big service. And then I'm also serving people in a different way now through coaching. So it was figuring out those things and then how to pick options to make that happen for me.
right.
And
Seeing the
everybody's,
possibilities, huh?
yeah, yeah. And everybody's different. There's some people who totally want to be an associate and have more of a set schedule and know what they're doing with their time and when they're on and when they're off, and that fits their values and who they are and what they want for their life. And then there's people who don't, and there's everything in between. So I think it always comes back to, like, why is it that I do what I do? What is my purpose? What do I value? And then trying to create your life around that, because I think that's really the key to having alignment in your life.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I sometimes go back with people to, we all thought we would love this when we went through vet school, right? We all had these
Mhm.
ideas of what life was supposed to look like as a veterinarian. And if you can go back to that and say, okay, I wanted this, 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 and this, and then create that for yourself, If
Mm-hmm.
the associate isn't lining up, if the, ownership doesn't align with you, if relief work doesn't align with you, whatever it was that you wanted when you decided to go to vet school, because we all thought we would love it and we all at one point did love it.
Mm-hmm.
We all got out of school and we're like, I'm so happy I'm a veterinarian,
Yeah.
and I don't know how long it took to get to that point where you were unhappy. Some people faster than others, but then why and how can I create what I need,
Mm-hmm.
for the rest of my life, and what do I want to have my legacy be, or whatever, what it was the idea behind
Mm-hmm.
becoming a veterinarian in the first place.
Yeah. And also telling yourself that you did nothing wrong. That was one of the big things that I had to work through, and where coaching really helped me was dealing with the shame and the guilt of, I picked the wrong career and I should never have done this. And what am I doing? And it's just life. Like, people change careers, people,
All the
get
time.
degrees in all kinds of things. It's not
Right.
specific to vet med. Like, they go out, they do the job for a while and then say, oh, this isn't it. And they change careers. And we have that flexibility too.
Right, right. Within the profession.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I used to tell my kids this. I'd like, well, what if I choose the wrong thing in college? Well, then you go back and you do something else. You can always go back
Mm-hmm.
to school.
Yeah.
You can always change careers. You can always add a degree. Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
so many things that you can do if it turns out that, down the road, you're like, this isn't quite doing it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I always say, if you want something badly enough and you want it, you put the work in, then you will have it.
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes with your mental health, is you have to apply, the tools and get someone to help you apply the tools. And some people have it harder than others, but there's always a way out, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know,
You're never truly stuck.
right. Yeah, whether it's through coaching or therapy or both, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people do both, which I think is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So, so what is the one thing that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you that you want to get out there before we get done here with this podcast? And we can always do more together. I think we probably
Ooh.
should.
Wow. What have you not asked me? You've had such insightful questions. I'm trying to think of. Yeah. I mean, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I would just reiterate that, if you're feeling stuck, there is a way out. And even if you are dysregulated, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It's just your nervous system, your brain, your body trying to protect you. Nothing has gone wrong. You are completely whole and beautiful and lovable and worthy just as you are. And if you want to make changes, then you absolutely have that power. And sometimes, it helps to have a little bit of help along the way, but there's nothing ever wrong with you.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I think the worthiness thing is so important. I probably don't say it enough on the podcast, but when people feel that they're unworthy of love or happiness, or it
Mhm.
breaks my heart. And because I just feel like everyone was put on this earth for a reason,
Mhm.
and you've touched so many people in your life that you don't even know, that so
Mhm.
many clients that we've touched that we'll never know how we changed their life. And, if you could know all of that, you would feel so powerful and so loved. And
Mhm.
so I agree with you totally that that's the most important thing, is just knowing that it's all okay, and you are totally worth it and worthy, no
Mhm.
matter what's going on with you right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. That's perfect. Okay, so tell me where people, if they want to learn more about you and your coaching, if they want help, if they want to sign up for your coaching or my coaching, where can they find you?
Yeah. So, my website is just www.daringdvm.com. And then my Instagram handle is the same at DaringDVM. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn as Dr. Amy Grimm. I don't hang out much on Facebook, but you can.
I think that's out. I think that's my
Yeah.
generation. My
Yeah.
kids tell me Facebook is out.
Yeah.
Instagram and TikTok are in, I guess, right?
Yeah, you can find me and be my friend, but I don't hang out much there. And
Right.
then yeah, I mostly am on Instagram and then on LinkedIn, and I'm always open to a virtual coffee chat, no strings attached. Even if you just want to meet and say hi and, make a new friend, I'm all for that.
I love that. Yeah. It really is powerful when veterinarians meet other veterinarians.
Hmm.
And if you're in any spot in your career that you're struggling with, even if you don't feel like you can get therapy or even coaching, if you're afraid of that, just talk to a vet.
Hmm.
Like I'm always here. I'll talk to anyone anytime.
Yeah.
And you feel the same. And that
Hmm.
it's just, we know what you're going through. And so we can definitely try to help, right?
Yeah,
I love that.
absolutely.
I love that. I'm so excited. So I definitely want to do this again. I say this on almost every podcast because I love people so much, but we'll have to try to get together and maybe we can talk some more about the nervous system and how that all works and different techniques, because I've got the compassion fatigue certification and a lot of that applies. And I think maybe the two of us can get together and maybe have a podcast about some techniques to help you regulate your nervous system.
Yeah, I would
You
love
open to
that.
that?
Yes.
Okay. And maybe I'm going to be on a podcast, on Amy's podcast, because she also has a
Yes.
podcast, right? What's the name?
Yes.
Is your podcast Daring DVM?
It is. It's very original. Just
I
kept the
love it.
same
No,
name.
that's the way you do it, right? You just have to pick a name and go with it. I
Hmm.
mean, that's just the way it is. So if you want another podcast to listen to, you can listen to hers as well. So I appreciate you being here. I loved meeting you and I think we're going to be lifelong friends now because we both have very similar tasks in life now, right?
Yeah, my nervous system is very excited to get to know your nervous system.
I love that. I love it. My Chihuahua brain and your monkey brain, right?
Yay.
That's amazing. All right. So, everyone, thank you for listening today. I really appreciate it. If you want to learn more, reach out to me or reach out to Amy, and we will help. Yeah.
Sounds great.
All right. Have a beautiful week, everyone. Bye. Bye, Amy.
Bye.